you're ready to go pretty much whenever.
So this is kind of a little surprise talk, and I've been doing this for the last 7-8 years now, since 2010-11 or so, and I do this at the end of the last 30 minutes of the last class typically. And I asked you all for your life lessons, things that you've learned over the years, and these are some of my life lessons, things that I've learned over the years, things that I forget sometimes, and then I give this talk and remind myself of these again. And I call them my 7 commandments in life, and I come up with some sort of a model for happiness through this. Okay. So my first commandment is be happy always, no matter what, and don't let events, good or bad, disturb your state of bliss. Now, when I say be happy always, right, you'll find that there are two things that happen. One is when things happen, right? Either things happening or what people saying something or people reacting or not reacting according to your expectation. That is one thing. That part you do not have a control with. That is what happens with each one of us. There are things that go according to your plan, things that do not go according to your plans, right? But then the second part of it is that how you react to those things, that is the part that you can control. So there somewhere is like you, yeah? And you have all these hearts and sunshine and all the nice words that you are expecting and all the good events that you want to happen in your life. So those happen, right? And then sometimes you have all the thunder and the clouds and the not so nice things and the not so nice ways in which people react to deal with you. So what you can be in the midst of this is this sort of this little lotus, because a lotus flower, right, often like grows in water and often grows in murky water. The water might be dirty, but the flower is always above it. So it's growing in there, but it's sort of there, but not quite there. It's above it. And in a similar manner, it can be helpful if you look at a life in the same way. I kind of like to look at it as like watching a movie. When you watch a movie, right, we get really engrossed, and it's really nice. Like we flow with the emotions, but we know that it's a movie. And as soon as we come out, we're back to a normal life. And it's helpful if we watch our own lives as a movie as well, especially when things are not going so well. So you can just take a distance, be like a lotus, and then look at yourself. And the moment you do that, I think it really makes a huge difference. And I read this great book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if some of you might have read that. And in the first part of the book, he talks about, he said that when he was under the age of 30 or so, he used to have suicidal thoughts and he was depressed and all that. And it got so bad that one fine day he thought that, wait a minute, like, I don't think I can live with myself anymore. And then he thought that, who is this myself that I cannot live with? So is there like one of me or two of me? And then the sort of the revelation that he had was that what we have in our mind, right, the thoughts and the things that we have, what we're thinking, that is not you. Those are yours, but that's not you. It's the same as saying that this hand is mine, but I'm not my hand. Or like the stomach is mine, but I'm not my stomach. So in a similar manner, your mind is yours, but you are not your mind. And that was a big revelation, I think, in a lot of ways in that book. And I find this in lots of different books as well. But the very idea is that when you know that you are not your mind, then you can watch your mind. And when you're getting affected, you can watch yourself. That you can just be aware that, yes, I'm getting affected. And the moment you do that, your mind kind of knows that, oh, I'm caught. Right? And you can get back to where you are. Because your mind really wants you to think that you are the mind. And so here, you find that, okay, if you're not careful, then what you see is that you're really like that, like a fig leaf being blown about. One nice word which someone says, we get really happy, and one not so nice word that someone says, we get really upset. And that might happen a lot. So if you start watching yourself, that what's happening, right, then you can be a little more stable. So here you have these desirable words or events happening, and you have all these happy things, and then the undesirable words or events happening, and we go through all these different emotions. Now, emotions are wonderful. It's fine to go through all these different emotions, but if we watch that as a movie, then it's more fun. Knowing that this is all I'm going through this, but I'm not this. And this is sort of a state which we want to start watching yourself, right? And we can kind of see that even when things are going not so well or when things are going really great, to see that as kind of a pattern, like the way the days are followed by nights and the way nights are followed by days. So you find that these patterns continue, and not to get too affected either way. So this is one. So I try to put it in the form of a model because I did that when I was teaching a class on evaluation of library of information services, the LIS 403. And in that class, I teach students how to make theoretical research models where you have variables from one thing causing the other. So here you have an external environment. So you have your words and events, right? And these words and events, they have an effect on your happiness. So here, when you see that, based on these words and effect, right? The events, they have some sort of an outcome on our internal reaction. So we do get affected based on this. But if you start observing yourself, then you'll see that it's like a pair of glasses. So at any point in time, the external environment will be like a glass half full or half empty, whichever way you like to look at it. There will always be things that are going well, and there will always be things that are not going not so well. So at any point in time, and that is why we should never postpone our happiness for the future, because you have to learn to be happy right here, right now, with what you have and what you don't have. And when you wear the happy pair of glasses, you'll see the things that are good. When you wear the unhappy pair of glasses, you'll see the things that are not so good. And so that's a choice that we make at a given point in time. And this actually has a great effect on our happiness. So this can moderate the effect of the external environment on our happiness. And that has a direct bearing on our happiness as well. But if we, and based on this internal reaction, right, we can actually affect our external reaction. So one of the things that I've learned is that not to react. So if someone says something insensitive to you, it can be very, it can be very tempting to just snap right back. And in that moment, if you do not do that, then you can come across as a big winner. And the way to do that is that if you can walk away, just make an excuse and get out of the room at that moment, if you think you cannot control yourself. But if you just be quiet at that moment, and then not to think of how to get back to the person, but rather to think of how to forgive the person. And when you do that, right, I found that it's very helpful because only one person needs to work on forgiveness and not both at that moment when you do that. And one strategy which I have found useful and which can be pretty bad is that if I'm really upset with someone now, I imagine the person dead. And when you imagine the person dead, right, you suddenly think of all the good things that person brings to the world, and all the value that this person brings, and suddenly what the little thing that has happened or the little event incident is not so big anymore, and I find it much easier to forgive. And really, I think the idea of death is used a lot in a lot of books. So there was one book that I read which said, "Who will cry when I die?" And in that book, the person said that I imagine my funeral every single day in the morning, and it was kind of dark. But I think the idea is that if you think that each one of us is here for a very limited time on Earth, then it sort of then it is easier to focus what really matters and what does not. So I try to think of it in terms of a carousel, right, and where you have people getting in and getting off, and that's happening all the time. When I gave this talk a couple of years ago, one person in the audience, I think, was Professor Jim Madrazo, and he has just passed away recently. And I've had lots of great interactions with Jim, and he was my mentor as well, and very recent emails from him as well, and now he's no longer there. So to know that life is very transitory. I think there are people who have written poems of think of life as like a bubble of water, right? So as you walk by, you see little droplets of water shining, and then on leaves, and that's what it is really. That each one of us has a very, very bubble-like life. So even though it's very, we think it's pretty sturdy in the sense that we can do a lot within a given lifetime. But at the same time, we lose people very quickly as well. And once you notice that, right, then it's really important to live each day with that feeling that, okay, we are all here for a limited time and we have to make the best of it. And there's this guy called Alan Watts. I'm not sure how many of you have listened to him. And There are some great videos of his on YouTube. And there's one video where he talks about life being a journey, which most people say that life is a journey where you're supposed to go from one place to the other, you accomplish something, right? And he says that life is not a journey. That's one of the things he realizes. That you're not going, people make you believe that life is a journey, like you go to school and you're supposed to finish school, and you enter college and you're supposed to graduate and you're supposed to get somewhere. And the fact is that we don't get anywhere. We're just trying to fill time in one way or the other, right? Whether you write 50 books or you sleep on the beach, right? It's just different things that we do, and it's a choice that we make. So he said that what really happens is that life is not really a journey which is taking us from one place to the other, but rather it is a time when music is playing, like in a party or in the evening, right? And you're supposed to dance while the music plays. That's all it is. And if you forget to dance or if you forget to enjoy the music, then life just passes you by. So that is sort of the key part. It's not that even though we think we're doing something, we are picking those things to fill our time and to give ourselves to derive meaning out of the things that are there. But each day, each time, each moment, it's really important to realize that we are supposed to have fun, we are supposed to enjoy, we are supposed to value whatever we have and to be happy. So yes, so this external reaction can really this gives us the power to change our external environment. If a person snaps at you and if you don't snap back at the moment, right, then I've found that person can actually end up becoming one of your biggest supporters over time. Because this person will think that even though I was not so nice to this person was still nice to me, and they can actually become one of your biggest friends. So the second commandment is have zero expectations from every other person in the world, and 100% from yourself. And when you don't expect, you'll never be unhappy, and everything you get is a bonus. Now this the 0 and 100 is kind of difficult. So you can replace that with minimum and maximum. So basically try to have more expectations from yourself and less from other people. And we all have heard of this great speech by John F. Kennedy where he says that ask not what a country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And in a similar manner, what I like to think of it is that ask not what people can do for you, what your friends, your relatives, your children, your parents, your spouse, ask not what they can do for you, but what you can do for them. And what happens is that a lot of the times we get really disheartened with people because we are trying to control people. We think that person is not living up to us or something, and as soon as we get attached to people, right, we start trying to control them in a way that we want them to behave in a way we want them to be, and we do that with children, we do that with our spouse and partners, we do that with our friends, and we have to really be okay with looking at people the way they are, and they don't always have to live up to our expectations, right? And the moment we start letting them be exactly as they are, that's when we let them blossom, and we let ourselves blossom as well. But of course, during these times, you have to give yourselves things to fill your time. So which means that you have to inculcate, when I say fill your time, right, it means make your monkey mind busy during that time, right? If you're focusing on other people, then you're sort of focusing on the shadows, whereas you can be the sun yourself. And how to be the sun is basically focusing on things that you can do. So all the wonderful hobbies that you all showcased on your websites, right? All of those are the kinds of things which help you be busy with yourself when you are in your alone time. So the ideal stage to reach is a state where you can be okay with being alone and being okay with people as well. And when people do not live up to the way you want them to be, then notice that the problem is not the people, the problem is we ourselves. So we have to work on our expectations. So the last 2 or 3 years or so, I tried to write another one of those commandments, I think, and that has really helped me, and that is that do not blame anyone for any behavior whatsoever. And I wrote that down and I tried to follow it, and sometimes it's very hard because it's so easy to blame. Right? You'll find a great video on YouTube called, which is a little short about wanting to blame your spouse for every little thing. And because it just comes as a very instant reaction to blame people. But then as soon as we say that you're not allowed to blame, or you're not allowed to judge, that really brings a lot of responsibility on ourselves, because then, in which case, we have to work on ourselves and not on the other person. Every time somebody does not live up to what we expect them to be, then we have to realize that I'm the one who's trying to control. and then to work back on ourselves in realigning our expectations. So when you do not expect from people, right, then your expectation is all from yourself. It's an internal expectation, and that expectation then leads to work. The external expectation can lead to some event and to work as well. And but this expectation, right, when you click on it further, this has focusing on external expectation has a negative correlation with happiness. So the more we, people may live up to your expectation or not. So it's fine to expect people or to say that this is what I expect from you, but it's not fine to tie our happiness to that. But if we tie our happiness only to ourselves, then that always leads to work. And focusing only on work is a great thing because work is a great filler for life. And I found that the only people who are ever respected in life are the people, they're respected for their work, not for the emotions, not for the feelings, not for anything else. So as long as we are alive, right, we have to focus on what are the things we can create, what are the things we can contribute, what are the ways we can help. And that is great because it helps occupy your mind, and it also leaves lasting contribution to the world. And then focusing only on yourself has a positive bearing on your internal reaction, and this has a direct effect on our happiness. So that is the second commandment. And the third one is never compare with those around you. Just given you 100% and don't worry about the results. So when I was in school, I studied in the foothills of the Himalayas in a tiny state of India called Sikkim, which used to be an independent country until 1975. And there in the school I went, I used to be pretty good at math, and every time I would get like 100 in math. And if I ever got a 99, my sisters would ask me like, where did you lose that 1 point? So I used to strive to get 100 each time. And then what happened was that when I was, I think in the 9th grade, that's when another student, when she used to come first in the other class, and she came to my class, and we both sort of started competing. And once what happened was that I got an 85 or something in math, and I was really happy because she had gotten an 83. And I felt that I was just happy that I had gotten more than her. And then when I thought about it, I thought like, what's happened to me? I used to be upset if I lost 1 point, and now I'm okay just because I've gotten more than her. And that's what I realized that what comparison does to you. That when you compare, right, you sort of you become okay with less than what you're capable of. And if you want to compare, I think it's you should compare with ourselves in terms of what we are capable of, and not with other people. And to set those benchmarks in terms of best practices, we can look at some of the great role models in the world and see how they have achieved, and we can have those as role models. But the comparison metric must be really high, and a lot of times just comparing with people around, right, can really pull us down. I was reading this autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi, and he was a short person, mediocre in studies, very bad at handwriting, and he talked about. And he was a not so good lawyer as well. He was a lawyer, trained lawyer, and there were other lawyers of his time who were like really famous. And when I think about it, right, when the Time magazine came up with the person of the century, it was Mahatma Gandhi and Albert Einstein who had a tie. And all the lawyers that were alive in Gandhi's time, they were no longer in the picture. But if you were to compare with those lawyers and not be this person that he could have been, right, then he could have not reached his highest potential. And we find lots of great examples of great people who have done that. Like you really have to find your song. What is it? I believe that every person, it's like every bird has a song, right? So each of us has a song or a dream, whatever we call it. And we have to find that one song that whatever we are born to fulfill, and try to do that and try to make that contribution to the world, and not worry about what somebody else is doing, because each of our journeys are very different, even though we might be born in a certain space or even within a certain family. So that is one. So when you compare, again, we focus on the external environment, we have external expectation, which negatively affects our happiness. We focus on things that we don't have rather than what we have when we compare. And so comparison also has a negative internal reaction, which has a direct bad effect on our happiness. The fourth commandment is everything happens for one's own good. We get what is best for us. And when I gave this talk once, a student came up to me after the talk and she said that I do not agree with your Amendment 4, and I asked her why, and she said that horrible things happen and it's okay for me to see those things as horrible. I don't need to see those things as good in order to accept them. I can accept them for what they are. And so in that sense, right, everything that you see, right, is what is. So if we look at snow, for instance, like when I first moved to Boston, I really loved Simmons. I loved the people. I loved the place. Right, it was all beautiful. The only thing that I could not cope with was the snow. And I think it was one of those really bad winters. And every time I shoveled and all that, the snow just kept coming back and back again, right? And we might have, all of us in the would have gone through that in some ways. And I got so tired of it after a month or two, and then finally I said that, fine, like stay for as long as you want to, like, I'm going to make friends with you and you can stay for like the next 6 months. And the moment I started looking at snow in that manner, it stopped bothering me. It just went on and so on. So the more we are resisting things, right, the more they tend to stay or linger. Before I did my PhD, I worked in the industry for 6 years as a software engineer. And there was one time when I worked in a company in Singapore, and it was a bioinformatics company. It was great. Like I got a great job experience in that company. We were doing a lot of XML and Java programming and all in that. And it was all good, except that the salary wasn't coming in for 7 months. The company was going through a really bad financial time, and they were not paying the employees, and finally the company closed down. So it was a really tough time for all the people working for the company. And I thought about it as to, like, I have to keep wondering, like, what was the good that came off my working over there? And that happened. Then later on, I worked for another company. I did my PhD and came to the US. And then I was in a conference going through interviews, and there was a professor, Jim Boffman, who was now retired, and he was the chair of the search committee that year, and he talked about a position in Simmons for an assistant professor. And he said that it's all good that you have all the things that we would need, except that we want to start a new program in health informatics, and we want somebody with bioinformatics experience along with everything else that you have. And so I came for the campus visit, and I had this whole team of people who were working from across different schools in Simmons, trying to start this health informatics program. And I had a meeting with them, and I could convince them that I have the work experience which is really required to contribute to starting this new program. And that was, I think, something that pushed me beyond what another candidate could bring in. But it took a few years, but that's when it made sense as to what was the use of my having had that experience in the past. And there are lots of other experiences like that. You will find instances in your own life as well when things don't really work out right. Then it just means that you're meant for something bigger and something better. My wife, she's a physician, and she was working in Singapore, and not she was working, she was studying in Singapore on her own and preparing for US exams, and she could not find a job as a doctor there because the Singapore government did not recognize Indian medical degrees. So she started preparing and she had a very frustrating 3 years wanting to work but not being able to work as a doctor. So she came to the US, and she had lots of interviews, and finally she did a residency from New York, and then she became a director in Carney Hospital in Boston, and now she is pursuing her fellowship in cancer and in oncology at St. Elizabeth in Dana-Farber. But then when we think of it, right, had she gotten a job in Singapore, she would have settled for a comfortable life just there. And I would not be here today giving this talk to you because I followed her here. She came to the US before me. So a lot of the things not working out at a given point in time means that you are meant for bigger and better things at some future stage. So those are actually just the right things needed for you to propel yourself to the future. So when you go through a difficult time, just know that this too shall pass. This is a difficult time, and it's going to be over. So here, when you have again the external environment over here and your internal reaction, right? And based on this, when you go down, when you click further, you find that again time is a moderator over here. So in the short term, things might be difficult, but in the longer term, things do have a purpose and they do work out. The fifth commandment is perhaps the most important. It says, live in the present moment. Do not worry about the future. It will take care of itself if you take care of the present. And the past, we can never change it. So it's sort of, it goes with Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, again. So even if you forget everything else, right, I would say that just remember one thing, that there is nothing more important than the now. That at present moment, whatever time you are in, is the most important. So right here, right now, all of you in this room are the most important people in my life. Right? Because maybe 10 minutes later, you'll all, this talk will be over, you'll walk onto your own different lives. But at this moment, there's nothing more important than me talking to you. And to remember this always, when you're eating your food, right, there's nothing more important than the food you're eating. When you're talking to someone, there's nothing more important than the person you're talking to. When you're working on an assignment, there's nothing more important than the assignment. Because everything else will take care of itself when you work on it. But what our mind tries to do is that our mind is always trying to take us either to the past, regrets or something, or to some future anxiety. And both of those are actually not real. Those just are created by your mind. The only thing real is the physical space you're in, the person you're talking to, whatever you're engaging in at that moment. So if you bring ourselves back to that moment, you realize that that is all that really matters, nothing else. The other things will take care of it the next day when you work on it, or the next hour when you get to it. So again here, you have your external events and words and your internal reaction based on the. So you see that you're aware, whether your awareness is in the future or the past or the present, that will have a different bearing on how you see happiness. So if you bring your mind back to the awareness of the present, right, and that has a very positive effect on your happiness. And how do you bring your mind back to the present? So there are great techniques. A very simple technique, if you don't have anything else, is that put your finger under your nostrils and check if you're breathing. Right? If you're breathing, it means that you're alive, because a lot many people are not. Right? So it means that you're very lucky, and just bringing your focus back to your breath means that you will come down to your to the present moment, and it's also giving your mind some work, saying that mind, just can you check if I'm alive or not, right? And a lot of people, I found that in a lot of religious traditions as well, they have these techniques where you either have some sort of words to repeat, right, or you have beats that people do. It's all any kind of word or passage or something, when you read it or repeat it, it's trying to bring your mind back to the present moment. And those are various techniques that you can use to do that. Sometimes, so I think repetition is the key here. So if you just repeat something, a passage or a word, that can help bring your mind down to the present moment if it's trying to go in 10 different directions. And the sixth commandment is that you can do the impossible. Remove the dust that's cloaking the power within you, and let your inner spark glow. And whenever we see any great people, right, people who have achieved greatness in their lifetimes, when we look at the lives of people like Barack Obama or Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama, anybody who has done a lot with their lives, we find that these people have this great sense of, I have this big responsibility of being able to contribute to the world. And you find that every person, we have the same potential, but there is something blocking our potential, and we feel that we are not good enough. And the moment we remove that from our minds, then you find that there is a lot that we can contribute and bring to the world. So when you see, right, it's the same lotus that's in every person. It's just that there are different layers of dust that's covering us. And the person who realizes his or her full potential is basically the one who has been able to clean up more of the dust. And one good way to do this is to read the lives of autobiographies of a lot of people who have achieved a lot. And you realize that, and the reason I like to read them is not because those people are great, but to realize how ordinary those people are. And once you realize that a lot of these great people are as ordinary as you and I, right? Then you know that, okay, I can also do the kinds of things which this person has done, rather than putting this person on a pedestal and thinking that, oh, I cannot be that person. So here you have, once you have this expectation from yourself, right, that will lead to the confidence, and that will lead to work, and that will lead to happiness, because now your expectation is just from yourself. You've removed a lot of that dust, and all you want to do is to contribute to the world, and that will really bring you the full potential of what you can bring to the world. And the last commandment here is that for every person that you see, meet, or talk to, imagine that you are seeing, meeting, and talking to God. And the essence is to identify with each person in the world as your own. Now the word God here is not that important. You can replace this with the one person who is the closest to you in the world, one person that you really love and really like. It can be anyone, your friend, spouse, child, parent, right? And take a time at this moment to think of that one person who is the most important to you. Okay? And now, after you have that person in your mind, then what you do is that replace this room with images of that one person, right? Who is the most important to you. And do that with, every time you go for a job interview, do that with the panelists that you see. Every time you give a talk, do that with all the members of the audience. Every time you're talking to someone, do that. So what happens is that this person that you're thinking of, right? This person may not be perfect, but you still love the person with the flaws. And we find that the people that we accept and people that we love, right? We are able to accept them with the flaws. But other people who we are not able to accept, we sort of start judging them. And you find that one of the things I realized is that inside every person, each one of us, right, there are just two things. One is love and the other is ego. And the love part is the same in each one of us. So if you look at the number of people in the world, right, if there are 7 billion people, there's just one love inside each of those 7 billion people. But there are 7 billion egos. So the interesting part is that there is a way for us to connect with each person if we go look at the love element or the sameness part of each person. And there's also a way for us to distinguish ourselves if we look at what the things that separates ourselves from each person. And we are able to manipulate this very effectively. With the people that we accept, we bring the love part and the connection part of it. And the people that we sort of stereotype or reject, right, we are bringing that separation part. And to know that this is inside each one of us, and it's just the love and the ego working, that can be very powerful. And once we see that with every person, right, inside each one of us, it's the same God element or the same love element or the same connection element, right, then we find that our life becomes much more meaningful and the whole world will sort of look like this. We have this whole sense of oneness no matter where we go and with each person we meet. And you really feel that the entire world is a very welcoming place once you start looking at the world in that manner. And this sense of oneness then leads to a lack of fear from anyone and a sense of identification with every single person. And that leads to self-confidence. So coming back to all the 7 models that we had, right? So this was the first one where we had this external events. So if you click on this now, so this leads to an internal reaction, and then until it gets to the first one, so you can keep clicking here. Yeah, so what I did was that I just put that on top, and then I'm putting the second model on that, and then I put the third model back to it. I merge that and take the fourth and the fifth ones in the same one. There's time over here, there's comparison, and then there's the present moment one, the one on the self-belief. So, yeah, so it comes to this complicated model when we combine all of them, all the 7 models into one. But what I realized was that once you start accepting every single person in the world as your own, right, then this external environment is no longer external, because you start seeing the external as part of yourself, because you're connecting with each person. So the external collapses at that stage and it becomes internal. But what it really means is that happiness is you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. So, this was a slide that we keep.